Thank you very much, Constanze, for you joining us. And it's a great pleasure to have you with us at this moment in this series of the interview on some result of our project ReIReS. It's a project promoted by ReIReS. The ReIReS project is a starting community of 12 European institutions that are building highly qualified, we hope, highly qualified infrastructure on religion studies. And ReIReS project aims to have an impact both on academia and outside academia. Mm-hmm. And it's a pleasure to discuss with you, and also we discuss, I begin with a question, a very general question, but we are waiting your answer. My question is very easy, I hope, and it's very and you can contribute to clarify our ideas, our project. My question: the House of European History pushes the objective of forming European citizenship by offering a European narrative of the integration process. At the center of your narrative are Europeans, men and women, of course, and their history from the French Revolution to the present day. And the values of religious freedom and the recognition of the pluralism, the freedom of the conscience characterizes the construction of the European citizenship. And how can all this be represented in the past in the your exhibition of the House of European History? This is a museum of the European Parliament. Please.
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer your question. So the House of European History is a forum for learning, reflection and debate about European history. And its mission is to understand European history in all its complexity, and notably, as you said, the history of European integration process, but also of wider Europe, because it is a house about the whole continent. So the House presents history in a way that addresses the complexity. It's a narrative for laymen. It's a narrative for people who don't know a lot about history. So it is a quite easy to read narrative, we hope. But at the same time, we try to address the complexity of European history and to show how even those historical processes that all Europeans have in common, that are shared, how they are experienced in very different ways across the countries, and also sometimes depending on the role that people played in the history. So I think that the question you address is, I think that we can read European history in a way as a quest for religious freedom, and also in a broader sense for human rights. And you could read some parts of our permanent exhibition in this respect. For example, when we speak about the revolutions of the 19th century with their attempts to establish democracy, human rights, and national autonomy also. But we have to say that this European history is an oscillation between the quest for religious freedom, but also, of course, the attacks on it and discrimination based on religion. So from the 19th century, we see that the emergence of modern anti-Semitism, for example, and we see that there is a struggle actually, that there's an oscillation in European history between discrimination and freedom on the other side. So we show also how the idea of a nation state is born, and how the idea of a nation state is sometimes connected since the late 18th century also to the idea that a state should be linked to a certain language, ethnicity or religion, and that this is a challenge for religious freedom, in the sense then that when the two are connected, then there can be issues of discrimination that come from that. But I would say that our exhibition shows about the 20th century that all the bloody developments of the 20th century and the genocide and the planned annihilation of Jews under German Nazi expansionism. And all these experiences have led to more efforts to embed human rights and religious freedom into international law and also the national laws. So we show in our exhibition the developments after the Second World War with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but specifically as a more European outlet, the European Convention on Human Rights, drafted in 1950, and where there's a prohibition of discrimination on religious grounds, and religious freedom is embedded there. And then the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, proclaimed in 2000 and which has become legally binding since 2009, where we also see that the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion is embedded into this. So first of all, the Charter itself, but then it went into the Lisbon Treaty, so it became EU law. We also have religious freedom embedded in the national laws of the European countries, but I think in some instances we also show that it has been an aspiration and it has not been achieved everywhere. But this aspiration is an integral part of European history, and yes, also in the sense of citizenship, although this is not exactly addressed in our exhibition as such, but it is very present there as an aspiration and efforts to embed religious freedom in the legal frameworks. Now, we also show the immense diversity of Europe. We have a display which speaks more about linguistic diversity, I concede, than about religious diversity, but it addresses the challenge of the diversity in Europe that has always existed. Europe has always been this patchwork of different small countries, very extreme under the Holy Roman Empire, for example, but also today. I think this continent is characterized by its small size if you compare it with other continents, and in this small size, a patchwork of very small territories or countries or states. And so when the idea of religion was bound to these territories, there was a lot of potential for conflict. So we have shown in one of our temporary exhibitions this oscillation in Europe between cooperation and conflict, inclusion and exclusion, and always based on this idea that it's a very small continent, but with little small entities that are entering in cooperation or conflict with each other.
Thank you very much.
That was very long.
No. Perfect. Great, perfect. I confess, I visited your museum 3 or 4 times. You know that every time, I had this experience of your exhibition. I appreciated very much that your exhibition offered the idea of the multiplicity and the pluralism of the perspectives and interpretation of the European history. Your narrative is a narrative that offers the multiplicity of shared memories of the Europe and the different countries between majority and minorities in religious minorities, political minorities, women and men, and the history for the right of the women in the European context. And I appreciated very much this your perspective of European history. And do you think that the pluralism of perspectives, and the pluralism also of the religion, of the situation, or the way to be European, is a way for the construction of the narrative, the shared narrative of the European history, and also for religions, for the history of religions in Europe. We need a multiplicity of interpretation, a multiplicity of perspectives for understanding the way which experience it today.
Yes, I agree. And actually, this is something that if you look at our exhibition, we could have also done differently. We could have also imagined to exhibit several conflicting narratives next to each other. And this was a choice that we presented one narrative because of the very limited previous knowledge of the visitor. But I think that we have invented some formats in which we can address more the pluralism, because I agree with you that these the coexistence of different narratives and of different perspectives should be more consciously perceived. I mean, I don't subscribe to the to political attempts to create one unifying narrative. I think there are many pluralistic narratives, and we have had events, for example, in which we opened our exhibition to poets and historians from different countries to guide in the exhibition around certain topics, for example, 1989 anniversary or 1918 anniversary. And then you could see if a Polish filmmaker guides in our exhibition, or if a historian from Latvia guides in our exhibition, they all tell their different narratives. Sometimes it's a family story, sometimes it's a nationalistic narrative, sometimes it's a European narrative, and they can all coexist. And I think these formats, that they work very well when we really open the exhibition for interpretation or by learning formats, and we juxtapose these different narratives. I like the way once, I think it was Timothy Garton-Ash who spoke in a conference in our museum. He really expressed the idea that we have to know the other person's narratives. We know our own narratives, but we should be curious and discover the other person's narratives. So what the Greeks say about the Germans and so on, because then we arrive at a real understanding. So in that sense, I agree with you that the pluralism of narratives is something that is very important to enhance understanding.
Thank you very much, Constanze, and all our wishes for your museum, for your jobs, and also for the role played by your museum in the construction of European memories. I saw many students when I visited your museum. You are a public, a very important public of students of all European countries and all Europe, not only European Union members, but all Europe. I think that also we can share the idea that also English people is European people, of course. Of course, after Brexit, England is always part of the Europe and our European culture, of course. Thank you very much, Constanze.
Yeah. Thank you for the questions, and I wish you all the best for your project.